Hello and welcome to the Revolutionizing Media podcast. In today's episode, we will be discussing technology in the film industry. I'm here with Samantha Farinella, filmmaker and professor here at UH West Oahu's Academy for Creative Media, the ACM program. Thank you so much, Professor, for taking the time out of your day to join me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So first, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in the industry?
Sure. I'm working class, come from New Jersey, and, really quickly wanted to go to New York City because that's like where everything was happening. So I went to New York City, first went to NYU, ran out of money, then went back to Hunter. And I basically worked in a hotel for a really long time and made my own work. And then a friend of mine said, let's go out on the road and be my tour manager, which I did. And about a year into that, she was like, well, why don't you make a movie about me? And we can give it to her fan base, which is like 10,000 people. And I decided to not only make the movie, but then like enter it into the Gay and Lesbian Film Festival. And I got like the New York Gay and Lesbian Film Festival. I won the audience award. So then it like went to 40 or 50 different places. I got to go all over the world. So that was really amazing. And I came back and I got a job at Nickelodeon, probably from that, because it was premiering and I got my coworkers to go with me. So anyway, I got the job at Nickelodeon Networks and worked there for like 4 years. And that was really great. I met so awesome people. But then all the layoffs happened in 2008. So then I worked as a freelancer. So I did like shooting on Underdog to Wonderdog, Animal Planet stuff, a lot of independent work I was just shooting. And then I got a full-time job as in advertising. I was a broadcast producer in advertising. And then after that was kind of not fun for me. I'm not a big fan of advertising. I mean, I know how to do it. But after that, then I went back to grad school, then started teaching. So that's like kind of my trajectory.
Okay, awesome. I'm familiar with some of your works that you've shown in previous classes. So Without a Scratch, Hunting in Wartime, both excellent, very excellent works. So
thanks.
And a lot of the courses you teach for ACM are focused on video production, shooting, editing, those types of things. And you're having students use software like Adobe Premiere Pro. So what pieces of technology, hardware, or software do you use in your day-to-day work?
I was thinking about this because I'm kind of like split in half, right? I'm a professor and then I'm also a filmmaker, right? So the day-to-day for a professor is, Microsoft Word, Adobe, and like Adobe for PowerPoints, Zoom. I use Zoom a lot because I also like in asynchronous classes, I videotape my PowerPoint and me explaining it. And there's really no better way. The file is so small when you shoot video with Zoom it's actually really works well. Yeah, that's about it. In my day-to-day, I'm using those more than others. And in terms of film, obviously Premiere Pro I use all the time. That's my go-to edit software. And then I also have my Canon C70 and DJI wireless mic. And Zhiyun, great company, small, powerful lighting that it's compact and it's relatively cheap. It's not cheap, but it's relatively cheap. And that's what I'm shooting my feature film on now. So they're the stuff I use.
Cool. Yeah. No, I remember last semester you told us you were shooting in Vietnam.
Yes.
So how was that project?
I love it. I mean, I shot, my feature before this was called Hunting in Wartime. And it was about native Tlingit Vietnam vets. And I have a thing about the Vietnam War. I think it was one of the worst wars the United States ever went into. Ho Chi Minh, who was a socialist, basically loved America and wanted his Declaration of Independence, our Declaration of Independence into his, like in his country. So he was really cool. But unfortunately, we had a horrible war there that dropped a lot of chemical warfare on the people, and they were peasant people. I can go on and on. But anyway, that one's always in my brain, that war. And I think it's about how not to escalate wars or have wars go on. I mean, 5 presidents were through that war. Like it just didn't stop. So for me, I really was still, even though I just made a film about Vietnam, I still wanted to do more. And my film played in Alaska. Hunting in Wartime and a Vietnamese professor there said, would you ever want to do something about the other side? And I was like, oh my God, of course. So we're kind of hooking up. It's probably 75% women veterans. So women in combat veterans. So it's way different beast. I mean, I don't know the language. I think I'm very good at like interviewing people, but when you don't know the language, it's hard. But it's wonderful. People are great and gracious and everything. It's hard right now in this climate making this film because everything is basically DEI about it. I'm a lesbian and I'm making a film about communist Vietnamese women, veterans who fought America. So I don't think like the Trump administration is going to want to give me any money for that. I applied for an NEH grant, but I don't think I'm going to get it. So yeah, it's just a matter of GoFundMe's and different ways of how I can raise the money to finish it up. But I'm going in June.
In June.
Yeah,
okay,
I just bought my my cinematographer's ticket yesterday.
Oh, nice.
So yeah,
awesome. That's big.
It's happening. It's happening. So that's good.
Okay, so from your perspective in the industry,
yeah,
what are the main ways that new technologies that are available for independent filmmakers, how have they changed the landscape of the industry? Yeah,
this is a good question. And they do always change the landscape. In the late 60s when Steadicams came out and like all these different things will always change the landscape, right? So I think the biggest one is that all of us can probably make a film now. And I think, when I was starting out 10, 15 years ago, that was a lot harder, and I think because of the rise of user-generated content and vlogging, a lot of things are made now, whether sound or lighting or camera, that one person can actually do. I don't know if that's great because honestly, I love the idea of getting together with a group to make a film is a very nice, beautiful thing. But it's also great to do it alone and do it cheaply, which you can now. So I think that is the biggest thing, that you can actually be a one-stop shop. And I think before you could do that, but it was a lot harder. But now it's a lot easier to do that. So yeah, I think that's changing. In terms of independent, I think the next question is, this has helped filmmakers to succeed. And it's kind of yes or no in terms of independent filmmakers, because yes, we can make films easier, I think, than we could before because we have this equipment. But I think the landscape of distribution is very hard and easy. Right? You can always make a movie and you could throw it on your own Vimeo channel and pay for someone to watch that and spread that out. And that's cool. That's like self-distribution in a different way. But I also think it's hard because more people are doing it, right? So you're getting flooded with a lot of different media makers.
It's
I
like
think
saturation kind of.
Yeah, it's saturation. Right. And it's like, when I was talking about Left Lane, I my first feature film, it was about a lesbian spoken word artist. And it won at the New York Gay and Lesbian Film Festival. And in those days, if you won at a film festival, you didn't have to apply anymore. It would just be like you were invited. So I won at New York's Gay and Lesbian Film Festival. And then it was like everybody was just inviting me to the film festival. And then I'd win more awards and get invited more. It was really cool. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much fun. It's fun to go to festivals. It's really fun to see how other people are receiving your work in person like that. But long story short is that is not the case now, like at all. Like if you could, for Hunting in Wartime, I won at Big Sky, which is a pretty prominent documentary film festival. And I thought, oh, this might be good. I'll get some, invites. The other one's nothing. It doesn't work like that anymore. So, again, there's pluses and minuses. If you're scrappy enough, you can get your work out there. But these, it's hard when you say studios now, right? Studios used to be these kind of like behemoths before the late 60s, and then things changed and there's still studios. And now when we talk about studios, we're talking about more online content places, right? Like Amazon Prime or Netflix or those. So the beast always kind of changes and it fluctuates, but I think everything is cyclical.
Yeah. So you mentioned Vimeo and sort of these streaming platforms.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So it's and even YouTube, I think, could be a good way for independent people to get their name out there, right?
Yes. Yeah, no, in terms of impact, there's always, if you're an independent filmmaker, the way you get your name out there is still film festivals. I know I said like the stuff about film festivals, that it's a lot harder, and it is, but you can still get your stuff in film festival because there's like prominent film festivals, right? And then there's these newer burgeoning film festivals. And as as someone that's, younger and up and coming, it's like, get your stuff in whatever you can, an advice to anyone listening to this. You always apply to the big guns first. You never apply to a smaller festival, because if you get into a smaller festival, the big ones will never accept you. So it's a kind of a pain in the butt, but you have to kind of just apply to the Sundances or the Big Skies or the Con or whatever you want to apply to. You may not get in, but if you do get in, that's really great. And if you don't, then you start to apply to the lower tier festivals. But a lot of people make that mistake where they kind of flood their, put all the applications in, and the first one that comes in, they say yes to. And if you say yes to that, and Sundance ask you, and you've already played at a festival, Sundance will never take you. So it's just, there's certain things about film festivals that people need to know, and that's a big one. But there's nothing wrong with lower tier film festivals. It's, first of all, for yourself or a filmmaker who wants to get a job or whatever, it's always great on paper to say you got into a festival. And if you won something, that's great. Like that's never going to change. And I think for film, festivals are still a really good thing, because it says that like other people judged your work and said that they wanted you in this festival. So it's always important, I think, as a filmmaker to try to get into festivals. And we have HIF here, which is great, especially for students. Like I feel like, I've gotten two of my students in my classes have gotten into HIF now, the called the University Showcase. And it hasn't been like that for West Oahu. So it's important that we here get our name out there, that we are making media here and that it's good stuff. So I want people to always understand how to do that in my classes. Like, how do you get into a film festival? It's important.
No, that's really interesting. Sort of the philosophy with film festivals, sort of shoot for the stars, like land on the moon. Yeah,
exactly.
That's really
yeah, exactly.
And I actually saw that on my email that you're gonna have a guest speaker.
Yes.
For HIF, right?
Yes. Andrew On. He made a film called Fire Island that was kind of funny. It was fun. It was good. And he's remaking The Wedding Banquet, Ang Lee's film. I don't know if you've seen that. It's one of his first films. So Ang Lee did like Brokeback Mountain, and I think he did The Hulk. He's like a very big Hollywood filmmaker. And but one of his first ones was called The Wedding Banquet, and it was about people who are gay, but somebody in their family is homophobic, so they want to marry someone of the opposite sex just to like please them. So it's kind of like this, and it's fun. It's funny. So it's going to be like a romp, but I think Bowen Yang's in it, so it's going to be good. So yeah, it's premiering I think on like Tuesday the 8th of April at Kahala, and then Andrew Yang's going to come to the class I think, and present. So it'll be cool.
I saw that actually you and a few ACM students went to a documentary film festival in Tahiti. So not only was it sort of exposure for the students of what film festivals outside of the US look like, it's a good gateway into the introduction to the film industry. So how was that experience?
I think it was a great experience for everybody involved. It's always stressful with travel and everything, but it was really beautiful. It's a great place. And I think they were exposed to a lot of intense movies because it's more of a documentary film festival. And we're talking about, indigenous cultures throughout the South Pacific and Oceania. So there was just a lot of really good, powerful films. And they also got to meet students from Australia and other students in other places. So I think it was great to have those connections. And I think anything, whether it's a university or, your work or a film festival, you always want to make connections if you can, because that's the best part of it.
Yeah, networking.
Networking, yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. I saw that the independent film Honora from Sean Baker just won the Oscar for Best Picture. In his acceptance speech, he praised independent filmmakers, saying, "Long live independent film." So I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that. And do you see independent films in the future taking a larger portion of the market with how successful some have been lately?
Yeah. I mean, this is the part where I talk about cyclical. Just a real quick history. It was like basically in the late 60s, all this upheaval was happening in our world with the Vietnam War, civil rights, gay rights, women's rights. All these things were happening in the late 60s. And Hollywood was still churning out Westerns and musicals and like World War II war films, and no one was relating anymore. And they were also, because of the advent of television, those studios were just kind of like losing revenue. So what happened was there was these schools at NYU and USC where had all these different filmmakers come out of them, like Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg and, all these different George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, all these people that now to be these, these big, big directors were hungry and young. And because of the downslide on Hollywood, they were given a chance to make things that would have never been made. So the 70s is like a real crux of that, like that change. But then what happened when they made these great films, these really epic films that we all know, like Taxi Driver or Star Wars or whatever. And then those films, they'll catapulted people into the Hollywood system again, right? Like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas probably single-handedly like created the studio system again. So then in the 90s, you had the studio system. In the 80s, you had the system. But the 90s, again, was another curveball. It was independent filmmakers were way on the rise then. You had Pulp Fiction, you had Reservoir Dogs from Tarantino, you had this, the Weinstein Group, which I hate Harvey Weinstein, he's a pig, but out of that came a lot of independent film. So there was a resurgence there, and then it slowed. Then then we had to me the rise of like DC Comics and comic book stuff that basically became movies, and that really changed. I feel like for the past 10 years, we really haven't seen that many independent films. I mean, yeah, Moonlight won a few years ago, right? So that's cool. But in general, it's been like very big, epic, blockbustery movies where, people are more exaggerated. There's good and bad. It's a little kind of simple. And I think that, again, we're turning the tide, right? With the Trump administration won, and they're really like hammering down anti-DEI stuff and anti-this and anti-that. And they're trying to like curb our freedoms. And I think you're going to see an uprise in like, okay, these stories aren't really speaking to me. I want to see maybe real stories about real people. And I think that's where Nora comes in. A lot of times women will get the Academy Award for being a sex worker in the past. And this one is way different because it really shows her and everyone around her as these workers, against this oligarch of a family that's very wealthy. So I think this is always cyclical. And I think what happens is something cracks in the system where it always happens, where big studios want to play it safe and make money. So they're going to go with prequels, sequels. They're going to go with things that have been done that have already made money. That's what they're going to go for. And independent film is a one-off usually and a little risky, right? But it's risky like Jaws was risky. Jaws was super, super risky. So was Star Wars. And like those films blew up. And I think the same thing with Anora. It's like a small film, but it just won the Oscars and won every award everywhere. So this will definitely be a resurgence, I think, in independent. But then there'll be a point where, I hate to say it for lack of a better word, but people will get greedy. And it'll be like those people that maybe made those films will get big films and will wind up in this bigger studio system again until something falls again. And I think it's just a system of like, there's always going to be big budget movies and studios, and there's always going to be scrappy independent people making that little thing that people want to see, and then that blows up. And then the big studios have to rethink all the same rehash they've been doing for 10 years, whether that's, the action thing or comics or whatever, and they're going to have to think about it in a different way. I think it's good. I think it's kind of like the Big Bang Theory where it kind of keeps happening, because you go back and you go back and you go back and you keep trying different things. But yeah, I think greed is an issue. I think it's an issue with everything. I think that it's really hard. I think a lot of Sean Baker's speeches are about this, about how hard it is to be an independent filmmaker, how hard it is to kind of get what you want out there. Not only if you even have the money to make the film, but then like, where do you distribute it and where does it go? And I think all these questions are still there. And I remember like when I made Hunting in Wartime, I made around 2016. And at that time we were talking about what's it going to be like? Like, what, because everything was changing. So like, what is distribution going to look like? And I still don't think it's landed. To get on Netflix now or to get on these big things, you really have to like film your movie with a certain camera and a certain look and a certain, bit and all this stuff. So it's really like definitely like filtering out people that maybe have great films, but it's not shot on the exact camera that Netflix wants. So I think, this always happens where there's gatekeepers and then there's people trying to crash the gate. And I think you'll always have that in art, always. art used to be where poor people made art. And now basically artists, especially painters and stuff, all these people are really wealthy. And it wasn't like that before. So it's like, how do you get back to making this class blind or something where people from all different classes can know that they can create art, because it's important to create art. It's part of humanity to create things.
No, that's really interesting. You talking about sort of the cyclical history of the film industry, and that there will be another resurgence, right?
Totally.
What I found interesting was studios sort of going after independent creators that have success and trying to get them in the deals with. Which is funny because when I talked to Eric at the Melee program, he actually said the music industry sort of sees a similar thing where like independent artists will find some sort of success and then the record labels, will try to. So it is sort of that the greed of the industry, right?
Yeah. And when you get sucked into the industry, it's also like you kind of have to make what they want to make, If you even look at like rap culture, early on, rap culture was very, very political. And then at some point down the road, it became really misogynistic and just about like sex and money. And of course, there's always outliers, and it's totally changing now, and it's different. But it's frustrating that happens, where sometimes it loses its soul and there's not a meaning or story behind it, but it's like fluff, basically,
When filmmakers get into these deals with studios, there's kind of a certain, like you said, Netflix has certain criteria. They want a certain look. So that could be sort of limiting the creativity of the creators.
Absolutely. And also if you have a administration, in the White House right now, that's very, very conservative, and is Netflix or are these companies going to be like, oh, let's not do anything that's gay related or diversity related or people of color related? Like, will that happen? I don't know. But when you're a big studio like that, you've seen it with Bezos. Like Bezos is changing his tune with everything, right? Mark Zuckerberg, he's becoming way to the right. So when you would think if you had money, you could be like, whatever, I'll do what I want. But it's not like that, because they want to keep the money, right? So a lot of studios are more conservative in the sense that they just want to make money and they don't want to have waves. But the thing is that people like waves. People like rebellion in a sense, right? So I think that there's always going to be a tug of war between the haves and the have-nots and people with money and artistic freedom.
And so, something you said that I thought was really interesting is from the audience perspective, right? With the cyclical change, there's a desire to see like storytelling that's a little more grounded rather than big blockbusters. Yeah.
I think so. I think we all long for that. Like it's nice sometimes to see, I don't want to say yourself on the screen, but someone that represents like when I'm watching Honora, like I lived in New York for 30 years. So it's like, I know the street she's walking on. I know Brighton Beach. I know these places. And it's like, it's just kind of nice to see a world that sometimes. And the same thing happened in the 70s. It was like every movie was made in New York at that point. And it's like, it's different, right? Because when the studio system has its claws in stuff, a lot of it is made in Los Angeles. So or on studio systems or sets. And it's like when you're independent, you're really making this stuff in the street or in a bar or somewhere, a restaurant, like real places that aren't just like made up in a studio. And you can feel the difference sometimes.
Do you think traditional studios could sort of learn anything from independent creators that have had success, such as Sean Baker?
That's a great question. I think that it's kind of like people in power everywhere. It's like you just wish that different people were in power. And I think that a lot of the people that are in power now are just run by dollar signs. And it's like, that's good. And I understand you need money to make a business, but you should also allocate money that you're going to lose, because most studios lose money. It's not like, and just make a number, right? Making 10 million or 20 million or whatever it is, make that number as a loss. And just give that money to 20 different independent filmmakers to make $1 million movie and see what they can do with it. I find that art, and I do this in my classes too sometimes, but when you have constriction, when you have like limits of art, like you can, make a movie, it has to be done in 7 days and you have 30 minutes to edit it. You will always get really interesting artistic stuff from it. And I think that the studio system should be nurturing new independent artists to do work, to give them a little grant of $1 million or whatever, and just be like, what can you do with this? Because then you're going to get this new blood and this new stuff, and new things are always great, and they're the ones that always make the most money. Like a big blockbuster will make money, great, and then the sequel to it will make some money, and the sequel after that, and the sequel after that, but it's never going to make the money like the first one did, like the most unique one did. And I think that's the thing. I think we need to cultivate, just as everything in life. And that's why I said, like, people in power never do it. But even like with our land or our waters, like, you want to cultivate this and make sure that you're preserving things so other generations will have something. And I think it's the same thing with art. I think we want to make sure that art is classless and anybody can do it. We want to make sure that all people's voices are heard, not just one type of voice that went to like an Ivy League school. It's just things like that. Like, I think if they invested in 20 different filmmakers a year in that way, I think we would get so much more talent out of these studios than we are, I mean, when I think about Bong Joon-ho and I think about Barry Jenkins with Moonlighter, I think about these different movies, or Nora, like they're beautiful, well-made, wonderful films, and they are still rare. It's not like I can just turn on Netflix and see something of that caliber all the time,
And sort of something that I've noticed happening here is like a lot of the big film studios that did Magnum PI or Hawaii Five-0, like they're empty right now. So I just sort of wanted to get your thoughts on film here and if that will lead to more independent projects on the islands.
I hope so. I mean, I actually think that independent is much more alive here than like a studio system is. I feel like people come in, they make what they have to make for the on location, and they go back to their studio to finish it or whatever. And it would be great. Like, I know Chris Lee has this vision of having a studio here where people finish their work here, and that would be awesome. But I think we need to even look further at the independent people, at what I talked about, like the one-stop shop, like these small people that, I'm teaching right now that can make something and form some sort of a group. Like, I know HIF has cool stuff, and there's a lot of different groups out here. Hawaii Women Filmmakers, like there's different groups out here, but I think we still need to keep making these collectives, because I think the only way to actually make something and make something good is by a collective, is by talking to other people and not just being in your own silo. And I think we need to do that, because I think the more heads that get together and the more diverse those heads are, the more from their different worlds or different backgrounds or different races or different economics, classes, it's going to make things so much more. And that's been studied and it's tried and true. The more diverse you have in a collective, the better the outcomes are. And I think it's the same thing here. I think we need to get together and just watch each other's work and help each other out and move. But I think that I'm actually looking forward to more the independent scene here. I think that there's a lot of stories to be told on Hawaii, and there's a lot of talent. And I think that we could definitely churn out like good independent film here. But we have to work together. I feel like since COVID, everybody's in their own silos, and that's not just Hawaii, it's everywhere. But I think we have to kind of climb out of that. We see the polarization in our politics. All this stuff is happening because we're in our own silos. And I think if we got together and talked more, we wouldn't see the animosity in the world, and we would just start to create things more instead of destroy things.
Professor, you've shared some really great insights today on the industry, the film industry. And one of my main goals for my capstone project is to get a projection of the future of the industry. So you said, the film industry is kind of in this cycle, right? So do you think that sort of cycle will continue, or will there be an equilibrium reached between studios and independent creators? And what do you see for the future?
That's a great question, honestly. And it's kind of a conundrum. I think right now in our world politically, we're in a place that we've never been before, and money will be taken away from artists. It's going to be, it always does. And when there's a conservative group in power, they always take away money from art. It just is. So we're going to have to get more scrappier for the next 4 years. Like that's a given. And that's okay sometimes, because sometimes with that, there's a burgeoning of new art.
And that's where some of the best films are
made.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or the best art. When you think of like a Robert Mapplethorpe, or, there was all this thing about wanting to shut down the NEH in the 1980s because of AIDS and gay people. And so much good art came out of that. So I don't think that's necessarily a negative for artists, but it's definitely like it's a workaround. I think what I kind of said earlier, I still believe, I think that you need both. I think that a good blockbuster is so much fun to watch and I love it. And I also love watching like small films that have grit. And I think that there needs to be an equilibrium. And I hope that at some point they'll just be a little less greedy. And like I said, just give money, give grants to people coming up. So there is this equilibrium and we're all getting art for something. And maybe not, it's not that much about the money. I mean, you need money, I understand, to make a studio and do this stuff, but a lot of things that are being made are forgettable. You know, like when I go to sleep at night, I watch a movie and I wake up, if I'm thinking about it, like I think about Honora, you know, I know that's a good movie. If it's out of my brain, that's just like fluff. And did that movie even need to be made? And I think that's the thing. It's like, let's make some fun movies that are kind of fluffy, but let's also make some deep movies and let's not be so dependent on money because money is being lost in studios all the time. It just is what it is. You're always gambling. So I say let's gamble on people and let's gamble on artists a little more to see what's out there and to create that next big blockbuster. You know?
Yeah, I had one more bonus question just for the end. How do you see AI being implemented more in film in the future?
Good question.
Because that's the big topic.
Well, I think that's like the scary part is that if you have a studio that just, you know, the richest place on the planet at one point was, you know, antebellum South. It was the South because they had slaves and they were just reaping benefits because they didn't have to pay their workers, right? And I feel like that is kind of, you know, AI will start to be a slave of something where there's a few people in power that will reap all the benefits and that there's nobody behind. And that's what always confuses me about all this stuff, you know, population and whatnot, when we're heading towards a future that is not geared for humans. So I think that, I mean, my gut is that you're always going to need real true artists because art is so unique. I don't care how many things you throw into a computer and how many
it's human.
It's human. Yeah. And that's to take away from AI. I think AI can do incredible things for us in terms of making things faster. You know, like editing has gotten so much faster as is. I'm sure it can get even more. Like there's cool things like that where you can make something and get it out to the world quicker. And I think that's beautiful. And we should embrace that, but we should also be cognizant of that there is a humanity to the world. And we should embrace that and not just think about dollars and cents, because that's what it is. I mean, AI is going to save big business tons of money, you know, and getting their $4 trillion tax break that they're going to get in a few weeks. It's just like, it's a lot for the wealthy, but where does that leave all of us, you know? And that's the thing. We don't want to be a cog in a wheel. We want to kind of create our own stuff. So yeah, I think there's good points to it, but I think we need to not make it be the actors that we're watching or not have something directed or even edited or shot by a computer. I think we always have to have the humanity in there.
Again, Professor, I just wanted to thank you so much. That concludes our time for today. And any last word?
Thank you so much. It's been great. I really enjoyed talking about this stuff. And I think, you know, I think it's easy to kind of lose hope and like look at the world like, oh, this is all messed up. But the thing is that things are destroyed and created all the time. And it's the artists at the forefront of that. Like a lot of times we're the first ones murdered in like a totalitarian regime, but we're also the ones that create the beauty that inspire people. So I think, you know, just keep making your art and we'll land at a decent place. You know.
Awesome. Thank you so much.